Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1205 of the Juicebox Podcast. Diane's father had type 1 diabetes, and she thought that she had, quote, dodged that bullet when she wasn't diagnosed at all through her 20s, 30s, 40s, but in her late 50s, she got type 1. Today, we're going to talk about her story and some other autoimmune issues that she has. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year supply of vitamin D. Drink ag1.com/juicebox. If you're a U.S. resident and you have type 1 diabetes or you care for someone with type 1, I need your help to help. How will your help? Let me tell you. You go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. You complete the survey. It takes about 10 minutes. And then the answers that you give to the questions in the survey, they help type 1 diabetes research. So you don't have to go to a doctor's office if you want to help with research. You don't even have to leave your home. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Help others, help yourself. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Arden started using a contour meter because of its accuracy, but she continues to use it because it's durable and trustworthy. If you have diabetes, you want the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. There's already so many decisions. Let me take this one off your plate. contournext.com/juicebox. I am quite literally covered in cozy earth. I use their towels. I use their sheets. I use their sweatpants and their sweatshirts. And I just got a pair of shorts in the mail, which I haven't even opened up yet. Maybe I'll do that during the ad later. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout to save big on everything in your cart. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX.
My name is Diane. I am 59 years old. I'll be 60 in December. I'm a registered nurse. I was diagnosed during COVID, May 29th, 2020. I am the daughter of a type 1 diabetic.
Oh, no kidding. Your father with us still? Mother?
No, he passed away from a heart attack in 2013.
2013. How old was he? Do you remember?
He was 71. 71 or maybe 72. I think he was 72 because he was born in 1941. So he was somewhere in there, early 70s.
How long had he had type 1?
He was diagnosed at the age of 14.
Oh, wow. And you were diagnosed like in your late 50s.
56.
Isn't that interesting? Okay. Any other type 1 in the family?
No type 1s, but a lot of other autoimmune disorders.
For instance?
So my dad's father and his brother married 2 sisters. So all of our cousins are once removed. I have 2 cousins that had vitiligo pretty significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad's sisters have some autoimmune disorders. I'm not quite sure what they are. One of them is a type 2 diabetic, but they have some autoimmune disorders too that I found out later, of course, after I was diagnosed.
Do you have any others?
Oh, yes.
What?
So I was diagnosed with a goiter when I was 9 years old. So I've been on I've had hypothyroidism since I was 9. So I've been on medication for that. I had no other autoimmune disorders until I was diagnosed with the type 1 diabetes. I actually had pernicious anemia going on at the same exact time. And it was noted that I was macrocytic, meaning my red blood cells were enlarged, when I was diagnosed with the type 1. And the hospitalist that was admitting me, she noticed that I was anemic and mentioned that I was anemic, but didn't follow up. She just asked me if I'd had any abnormal bleeding or anything like that. And I I said no, and that she left it at that.
Hmm.
So, and then I also have autoimmune hepatitis, which I got later diagnosed with. That was and then I have some vitiligo as well that's going on too. So.
When did the pernicious anemia start?
So the pernicious anemia actually was occurring at the same time my type 1 diabetes was occurring, but it didn't get diagnosed until I started having significant neurological symptoms.
Mm.
The type 1 diabetes hit me hard, but I was prepared because I'm a registered nurse and I grew up living with the type 1 diabetic and saw all the trials and tribulations that he went through.
Yeah.
And so I was familiar with the type 1 diabetes and I was fine. I mean, I wasn't fine with it, but I mean, I had come to grips with it.
Mm-hmm.
But the pernicious anemia really scared me a lot.
Tell me why.
I started with having balance problems, and my balance is, as I've gotten older, my balance hasn't always been that great. But I noticed that my balance was really bad. I could hardly even walk straight. I developed a small tremor in my left hand, and I thought maybe it was just, like my blood sugars, if they got low, maybe it was that. I became so depressed and anxious. I was crying every night. And unfortunately, too, we had a dog that passed away during COVID as well. I've always been a nurturer and we've always had a dog, and I didn't have a dog. And my husband was like, let's not get a dog for a while because we are older and we have a travel trailer and motorcycle. And
yeah,
he's like, I'd like to enjoy some of these things first before we get another dog. Then I was crying every night and he's like, okay, we can get a dog.
Oh, you got one? Because Diane, you can have mine, either of them or both. It doesn't matter to me. I'll bring them to you even.
I would, if I could, I would have a dog rescue.
Oh.
My husband's like, no.
I have a brand new bag of dog food and $50 I'll give you along with those dogs. What do you think of that? Get you going.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Yeah, so I had all these neurological problems, and it got to the point where I couldn't even shower. I couldn't take a shower with the shower door closed. I was so anxious. I went for a routine eye exam, and my eye doctor said, you have nystagmus, and that's where your eyes jerk.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, I do? And he said, well, you don't seem surprised by that. And I said, well, I'm a neuro nurse. I know what nystagmus is.
Oh, yeah. He didn't, the word didn't shock you. Right.
Yeah. And so he said, oh, I'm just going to send a little email to your primary doctor. And I said, okay. And so then my primary doctor called me and said, I got this email from your eye doctor and I'd like you to come in and get checked out. My primary doctor wasn't able to see me right away. So I went and saw one of her colleagues who's a wonderful doctor. And he, was doing a physical exam and I had no reflexes. And that's one of the symptoms of B12 deficiency is you lose your, when they hit the hammer with your knee, you lose your reflex.
Yeah.
And he listened to my heart and he goes, you have a heart murmur. Have you ever been told that before? And I said, absolutely not. I religiously work out 3 days a week. I've never had a heart murmur. He goes, yeah, you have a pretty significant heart murmur. And that really upset me.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm going to have him drop a bunch of labs and it was like a Thursday that he saw me. He goes, I'm going to have him draw some labs and we'll go from there.
If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen. My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information. The Contour NextGen blood glucose meter is the meter that we use here. Arden has one with her at all times. I have one downstairs in the kitchen, just in case I want to check my blood sugar. And Arden has them at school. They're everywhere that she is. ContourNext.com/juicebox. Test strips and the meters themselves may be less expensive for you in cash out of your pocket than you're paying currently through your insurance for another meter. You can find out about that and much more at my link, ContourNext.com/juicebox. Contour makes a number of fantastic and accurate meters, and their second chance test strips are absolutely my favorite part. What does that mean? If you go to get some blood and maybe you touch it and, I don't know, stumble with your hand and like slip off and go back, it doesn't impact the quality or accuracy of the test. So you can hit the blood, not get enough, come back, get the rest without impacting the accuracy of the test. That's right. You can touch the blood, come back and get the rest, and you're going to get an absolutely accurate test. I think that's important because we all stumble and fumble at times. That's not a good reason to have to waste a test strip. And with the Contour NextGen, you won't have to. ContourNext.com/juicebox. You're going to get a great reading without having to be perfect.
So my labs started trickling in, and I have, my chart through Providence, which I work for. I started seeing my labs, and I saw that my B12 was really low. I would think I was 107, and low normal in the United States is, I think, 200 or 300. And I was like, oh. So I sent him a text. I said, hey, I see my B12's low. Do you think I could get some B12 shots? He goes, yeah, I'll make arrangements with my office staff. And then more of my labs were trickling in. And I still saw that I was macrocytic, meaning my red blood cells were very large and immature. By Sunday evening, he texts me and he says, I think you have pernicious anemia. And I thought, pernicious anemia? I think I remember something from nursing school. Doesn't that have to do with vegetarians?
Diane, so I'm looking here just so people can catch up a little bit. Typical presentation of pernicious anemia includes fatigue, pale appearance, tingling sensations, depression, alterations in vision and smell, urinary incontinence, psychotic episodes, weakness, involuntary movements due to the B12 deficiency. You had all of that. Like, you had a lot of that stuff going on.
I had a lot of that stuff going on. It was crazy. Yeah, so I had all these neurological symptoms. And so then when he came back, I think you have B12 deficiency, pernicious anemia. I started doing research, and I saw one of the number one symptoms was a heart murmur. So, and then all the stuff that I was reading, of course, I'm a nurse, so I immediately start educating myself on everything. Mm-hmm. Even when I became a type 1 diabetic, I did so much research, and that's how I found your podcast.
Oh, cool.
I never listened to podcasts before. I mean, I've had lots of hear people talk about them. During the pandemic, especially, a lot of people were, listening to podcasts. Right. Especially when it comes to my health. I've always, and because I am a nurse, I always, when I come across something I don't know, I dive right into it and become educated, familiar with what's going on.
Mm-hmm. What were you just Googling type 1 diabetes, or how did you, what was the way you thought to figure it out?
I don't know how exactly I found your podcast. I think I was just trying to find things to keep me busy during the pandemic. Everybody was on lockdown. Mm-hmm. There was a couple of podcasts that I was listening to, and I came across your podcast, and I started listening to it, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love this.
Oh, I'm glad.
And I started telling everybody about it. When I was having all the depression problems before I was diagnosed with the B12, and I started having all these depression problems and anxiety.
Right.
And then, of course, being a healthcare worker trying to wrap my head around doing the whole pandemic stuff. I work where I work was saying, oh, we have counseling, for healthcare workers. We have for employees, we have counseling. You can do it all online. And so I tried to find somebody to talk to. And I found somebody. I kind of wanted to find an older woman my age, but couldn't seem to find anybody. But I did find a young woman, and she talked to me one session, and she's just like, well, I don't know what I really would do for you. We just didn't connect.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in the hospital and I got diagnosed with the diabetes, of course, being in my 50s, and I was overweight, the hospitalist immediately started talking to me about type 2 diabetes and how my primary doctor would follow up with me and talk to me about metformin. And in my mind, I said, no, I'm not a type 2. My fasting blood sugars had always been, high 90s, maybe 101, but never higher than that. And I had just had a physical about 2 months prior to being diagnosed. I spent 2 nights in the hospital, teaching me how to give injections, which I already knew how to do, of course. Mostly I was just visiting with my friends. The nurses that were my nurses were people I already knew. And I spent 2 days in the hospital during COVID. And then I got discharged on a Sunday. And then the following Monday or Tuesday, I had a virtual appointment with my primary doctor. And she immediately said the same thing. She said, you don't just go from normal to having all these symptoms. I'm going to test you for type 1 diabetes.
Diane, is that what got you? Is just the medical background? It wasn't that your dad had type 1 and that you guys had all this autoimmune that made you think, you know what I mean?
Oh, I hear what you're saying, but I had been tested numerous times as a child. And even during my pregnancies, I have 2 kids. And during my pregnancies, I never had any gestational diabetes. Nothing ever presented itself before then.
Right. Okay.
And my mom did say I had a glucose tolerance test when I was 12. It was an 8-hour test. And I had to drink the syrup stuff. I had to drink that every hour. And then I had to do a urine and blood test every hour. And my mom said that I had an abnormal curve, but that I was not a diabetic. And I remember my brother had the test too. I have a brother that's 18 months younger than me. And he had that test done as well. And neither one of us came back as, having anything abnormal.
Does he have diabetes now or no? He doesn't.
No. Mm-mm. He does have heart conditions like my dad did. He had a heart valve replaced in 2019, I think it was.
Your father's heart stuff was not from the type 1. It was a complication.
It was a complication of his type 1.
Okay.
He had 2 open heart surgeries and he had atherosclerosis. I'm sure, he grew up in the age of, testing your urine and boiling needles. And I remember him sitting and sharpening his needles with a whetstone.
Really?
So I grew up with all of that. Oh, yeah. Grew up with the smell of insulin in the morning. My dad and I would share the bathroom in the morning when I was getting ready for school. I would smell. I love the smell of insulin. I know some people say they don't like that smell, but it was before the insulin that we have now. Of course, it was equine and, pork insulin.
That didn't smell like Band-Aids?
Yeah, it has that smell. I like that smell.
Even back then it did. I was going to ask you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I was struggling with all the depression and anxiety. And so I reached out to my endocrinology team. And when I finally did get to see an endocrinology, it was a nurse practitioner. And she's also type 1. I really like her a lot. She's more of a managing. She didn't really give me a lot of information. And I think partly part of that was that was a hindrance that I was a nurse, and that she figured I already knew maybe, or I was doing MDI. When I was diagnosed, I was 9.3 was my HbA1c. I did not have ketoacidosis because I think partly because I caught my symptoms fairly early.
So we went to the movies yesterday and I wore my Cozy Earth joggers, but I was missing my Cozy Earth pullover because I've lost some weight and it was so big it didn't fit anymore. But luckily for me, I ordered another one. And double lucky for me, it arrived today. Let's take a look. What did I get here from Cozy Earth? First of all, simple packaging, but once you open it up, beautiful bag that this comes in here. Definitely reusable and lovely. What's in? Oh, I got shorts, guys. Oh, look at this. These are gray. Beautiful, soft. Love it. Great shorts for summertime. And what else did I get here? It is... It's my pullover. It's what I needed at the movie theater. But I didn't have. But now, you can't feel it, but I can. You want quality? You want to be just warm enough without being hot, just cool enough without being cold? You want Cozy Earth products. Their towels, their sheets, their clothing. I'm rubbing it against my face. I'm rubbing it right. Okay. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code Juicebox at checkout to save big on your entire order. And you'll just be as happy as I am right now when you buy stuff for yourself. Oh, I'm going to hug it again. I'm hugging it. Oh, there's links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com too. So what is this? What is this here? I'm going to put it in this bag. Look at how nice this bag. What else could I use this bag for? CozyEarth.com, baby. Sleep, bathe, live, comfortable, quality. You deserve it.
It was my vision that got really bad. My vision was so blurry, I couldn't even see. We write the patient's names on our unit on a big dry erase board. And from my charge nurse desk, I could not see the patient's names on the board. And I was telling my coworkers, man, my vision is so bad. And I just had my vision checked. My husband and I had been fishing. It had been like going on for 2 weeks. I noticed I was having polyuria, polydipsia, but I avidly exercised 3 days a week, was, weight training. And I thought, I'm just more thirsty. I just started poo-pooing all these symptoms.
Right.
Yeah, and I noticed my urine was dilute. I was going to the bathroom every 45 minutes to an hour. I was like, this is crazy. And then my vision was blurry.
You're peeing yourself blind.
Pretty much.
See, I feel like this is interesting for people because even as having a career as a nurse and growing up with a parent that has type 1 diabetes, you still were just like, well, this, you know what I mean? Like just the ability to write things off is so common, like for people.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And especially at my age, at 56, I was like, well, this is ridiculous that I would be a type 1 at 56. I mean, why wouldn't it have caught me sooner?
Right. Yeah, you felt like that was, you had gotten past that.
I thought I'd, dodged the bullet. That's what I thought. I thought, I've dodged the bullet. It's not going to happen to me.
Well.
My husband and I we like to salmon fish. We'd been fishing. And my husband, I couldn't even see the leaves on the trees. Everything was so blurry. And my husband's like, you need to go to the doctor. And so I went and saw my eye doctor and he said, well, I don't see any diabetic damage. Your prescription's a little bit different than the last time I saw you, 3 months ago. And I thought something's wrong. I've got to go to urgent care. And I thought, urgent care during 2020. Great. Who knows how long I'll wait? Well, lucky for me, Saturday afternoon, I get there and there's only 2 people in the waiting area. So when the nurse calls me back, I said, can you check my blood sugar? He's absolutely. And he checks my blood sugar and his meter says high. And I said, how high does your meter go to? He said 600. And I was like, oh, great. I guess I bought myself a golden ticket to the ER. And he said, as a matter of fact, you have. And he brings out this golden piece of paper and writes all my vital signs on it. I was like, this is crazy. And I come home and I get out of the car and I just start bawling my head off. in the driveway, and my husband's putting the boat away. And I said, I have to go to the emergency room. And he's like, okay. So I packed a bag and went to the emergency room.
Wow. Did you ever get COVID, by the way?
No, I've never had COVID.
I was just wondering, going into the hospital in the middle of it, I was just wondering if it found you that way.
Yeah, and I was concerned about getting COVID at work. Of course, we were doing all the PPE and all that jazz, but I worked on a unit. I didn't work in critical care. I work on a neurovascular unit.
Okay.
I was concerned about getting COVID too. But I always wash my hands and wear a mask, and we were quarantining and the whole bitch,
Yeah.
After I got diagnosed with the type 1 diabetes, and I was having all problems with the depression and anxiety, and I tried to get a counselor and it didn't work out. And so then I reached out to my endo's office and I said, is there a counselor that works with your patients? Could you refer me
to
a name or something? So they gave me a name of this psychologist. His name's Michael Fulop, and he is amazing. He's also type 1 diabetic. He was latent onset diabetic. I think he was in his 30s. I started just seeing him, and I would sit down and chat with him. We would just chat like professionals. I really enjoyed seeing him. It wasn't like counseling so much. It was just, I didn't have any other type 1s around me. And I was listening to the podcast and, trying to educate myself. I saw him a few times, and then that's when I got diagnosed with the B12 deficiency. And then I had more problems trying to get my team to listen to me, because once I got the B12 shots and I educated myself about pernicious anemia and learned that I would need B12 shots for the rest of my life, my primary doctor was not on board with that. She said, well, your numbers are normal. And I said, but I have a malabsorption problem.
Right.
I will need this the rest of my life. And nobody was listening to me. Oh, it was crazy. And I got this wonderful book written by an ER nurse and her ER husband, who's a doctor. And it's about B12 deficiency and their trials and tribulations. She was B12 deficient as well. And they started seeing patients in their ERs with symptoms, older people who, little old lady was like come in confused,
right,
who were falling, and they're saying, oh, they just have dementia, they're getting old, and nobody was testing them for B12. And it was an amazing book. It was an eye opener for me. I felt bad for my poor husband because we went on a fishing trip mid-June while I was dealing with all of this, educating myself, reading this book, trying to get my team to listen to me. I would read stuff in the book and when we were fishing in the boat, and then I would start crying, and then I was yelling. My poor husband, he's just sitting there going, yes, I hear you.
Diane, he loves you because you didn't, fall in the water by mistake.
For sure. He loves me so much. And he totally has been so supportive through all of this. It's amazing.
Wow. That's something.
He's listened to the podcast a few times too.
Oh, nice. That's excellent.
So once I got diagnosed with pernicious anemia and I had all this movement disorder, gait problems, balance problems, I had all these fancy tests for my vision, my nystagmus. I couldn't see in the dark. I finally had to plead with my neurologist to prescribe me the B12. He said, well, your primary doctor should be taking this over. And I said, she's not listening to me. She says that my levels are normal and I need this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So he prescribed a one month, one-time dose. I thought, well, thank God somebody's listening to me. In the meantime, I adopted a dog during the pandemic. Then I was going to see my psychologist, and he was helping me. And I was telling him about the podcast and how much I enjoyed it. He started listening to it too. He does not a lot of research, but he helps in some diabetic research.
Mm-hmm.
He does stuff with Dexcom also, and I was doing MDI. In 2021, I got diagnosed with pernicious anemia. And then in 2022, I had some lab work done. They put me on a statin right away. The endocrinology office put me on a statin because of being a diabetic. They worry about your cholesterol. So even though my numbers were okay, they still put me on a low dose of Lipitor.
For cholesterol?
Yes, for my cholesterol.
Right.
I saw my nurse practitioner for, routine endo office visit, and she did some lab work, and she noticed that my liver enzymes were just slightly elevated. So the next appointment I had with her, she brought it up that she said, "Oh, I see that your liver values were slightly elevated. I'm going to have I don't think she actually said it to me, but she might have sent it in an email or something saying that she let my primary doctor know about it. Well, nobody ever followed up.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I saw her in June of 2022, it might have been like September. And oh my gosh, I was so sick. I was so fatigued. I almost passed out in the shower, and my husband had just left for work. And I thought, man, I've got to make it to this endo appointment. And so I got to my appointment, and when my nurse practitioner came in, she goes, "How are you?" And I said, "I am horrible. I feel horrible. I'm so fatigued. I almost passed out in the shower today." And she said, "Oh, that's unfortunate." She was concerned.
Right.
She sent me to the lab, managed to make it home, and I hadn't had much of an appetite, and it had started having some nausea, intermittent nausea like that week. And so then I came home and I was hungry, and I stopped and got some tacos from Taco Bell. I ate one taco, and then I laid down on the couch and was taking a nap. And then my phone rang, and it was my endocrinologist's office. And they said, "Your liver enzymes are elevated and you need to go to the emergency room." And I was like, "Oh, that's not good."
Mm.
So I packed a bag, and my husband, unfortunately, was home. So he took me to the hospital. And of course, they were still doing the whole mask thing at work. They redo my labs because they couldn't see the labs. And my liver enzymes were through the roof, like I was a raging alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the first thing they asked me was, "Do you drink alcohol?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I don't drink any alcohol." And so they admitted me. They tried to give me some medicine called Mucomist. It's an IV medication that binds the toxins in your blood to help your liver recover.
Right.
Oh, that just made me horribly sick. And the hospitalist, I told him I don't want to take any more of that. And it was just because I asked him if I could take that. He said, "Sure, we can try that." And being a nurse, I know some things. I know quite a bit of things. They did an autoimmune test on me for autoimmune hepatitis. I saw a GI doctor while I was there. And of course, it was a send out test. So I spent 2 nights in the hospital on my unit with nurses that I know that I work with that took care of me, which was, I asked for that, actually. I thought I'd never asked for that, but I wanted to be where people that I knew and that I loved and that I knew loved me.
Right.
I spent 2 nights there, and I started feeling, a little better because they'd given me some IV fluids too. It took quite a while for that test to come back, but about a week after I was in the hospital, my test came back autoimmune hepatitis.
A week?
It took a week for the lab to come back. Yeah.
Yeah. When you get those B12 shots, how long does it take for those symptoms to start dissipating?
Well, everybody's different, but probably about so initially when you are diagnosed with B12 deficiency, they give you 4 weekly shots. And then after those 4 weekly shots, they may retest you, they may not retest you. You have to be off B12, any kind of B12 supplementation for 4 months before you can get a true B12 level reading because it stores in your liver. And so your body holds onto it for quite a while.
I see. But for you, you started the injections, and when did you notice like the symptoms going away? How long?
After about the second injection, I started feeling better.
That fast? Yeah.
And then, yep. Yeah, you feel it pretty quickly. And B12 is very cheap, very inexpensive. The only type of B12 injectable in the United States through prescription is a synthetic B12, which is cyanocobalamin. And I was doing the cyno injections, and then I had the B12 I had the autoimmune hepatitis, and I had been educating myself about B12 injections and the types that you could get. I was getting some methylcobalamin from a pharmacy in Florida, and I had just started injecting myself with the methylcobalamin, which is more like what your body actually uses or synthesizes.
Right.
I don't feel that the synthetic was working well for me.
Interesting. Can I ask a question about the autoimmune hepatitis? Like, what's the treatment for that?
So they put you on high doses of steroids, which was so horrible.
On your blood sugar, right?
Oh my gosh, my blood sugar was crazy.
Right.
Oh, and in the meantime, when I was seeing my psychologist, he kept asking me, "Who's your endocrinologist?" I said, "I have not seen an endocrinologist." And I said, "All I've been seeing is a nurse practitioner." And he said, "Well, you should be seeing a doctor at least once." And so he sent a referral to my endo's office for, saying, please have her seen by an actual MD. I never heard anything from the office ever. And then when I came in with the high liver enzymes, my endocrinologist, who I'm now seeing, he saw my lab values and decided to take on my case because of that. Not because that I was a type 1 diabetic, but because my liver enzymes were elevated. That's when he decided to take me on.
Took notice of that. So
it's so crazy.
Yeah. So the steroids, they hit you with them. It's not over then, right? Is there maintenance that has to be done?
Yes. So I was on the large doses of steroids for like 2 months. Then I went on a taper, and then they put me on a medication called azithromycin. I take that daily, and then I have to have lab values drawn every 3 months to make sure that it's working and doing its job and not creating other problems, because there's a lot of serious side effects with this medication too.
And this is a thing you only knew about because of lab values. You weren't having an issue that you were concerned with?
I was having fatigue, and I did have some jaundice going on, but it was very mild. You couldn't really tell unless you really looked close. But no, I had no enlarged. My liver wasn't enlarged. I had no pain. I just had some mild nausea. I did notice my stool coloring had changed, but mostly it was just the fatigue. I was so fatigued.
No amount of sleep made you feel rested?
No, but I'm a night shift worker too, so that, always caused all kinds of problems. And it's funny because a few months after was diagnosed with the autoimmune hepatitis, I listened to an episode of a young man who was type 1 diabetic in South America. Who also, he was on your show.
Right.
And he had also been diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis. But he could not take the maintenance medications and has to stay on steroids.
Right.
And he talked about how difficult it was for his insulin, and all that stuff. Oh, yeah. And they put me on this, I don't even remember the name of the insulin. They put me on some high concentration of insulin. And then when I did the taper, I actually had to taper myself. Nobody followed up with me from the endo's office okay, you're on these high doses of insulin. So when they start tapering you off the steroids, then, we'll need to start tapering you off the insulin. I was the one that had to taper myself off the insulin.
You at least knew to do it, though.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
I knew that I had to do that because if I didn't, my
You're gonna
gosh,
get crushed.
my blood sugars would have been
Yeah.
ridiculous. I would have been in the toilet, so low. It would have been ridiculous.
Right.
But it really frustrated me that nobody on my team was following up with me at all.
Mm-hmm. Diane, my daughter was in the ER this past week twice, and she checked into the ER twice, 2 different days, was pretty much like kept there for 12 hours at a shot. And in 2 separate visits, 12 hours at a time, I'm going to let you guess how many times somebody asked her about her blood sugar or tested her blood sugar.
Probably one time.
Never. They never brought it up.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Isn't that horrible?
She's 19 by herself in a hospital room with roommates. She comes in, I have type 1 diabetes, blah, blah, blah. Here's what I'm here for. And no one ever mentioned it to her ever once, ever again. That was it. As if she wasn't passing out, it wasn't worth talking to her about.
Right, because that's not why she was there.
It's, absolutely. I was really floored by that, honestly.
Yeah.
No follow-up, no concern, nothing.
It's crazy. It's so crazy. Hospitals, our staffing is crazy. I can't even tell you on my unit. We have so many travelers. We have hired up quite a lot of new nurses, but they don't know a lot of things too. It's just crazy. The ERs, it's just unbelievable. The ERs. I always tell people, if you don't have to go to the emergency room, go to urgent care. Just go to urgent care first. I've sent my employees, I've sent my coworkers down to the ER. I had this one gal, her blood sugar, she came to me one night and she said, my blood sugar is over 300 and I can't get it to come down. And I'm just feeling horrible. And I said, okay, just go to the emergency room. This was like 3:00 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
She called back up to the unit at like 7:15. She says, I'm still down in the ER waiting to be seen. And I said, just go to urgent care. I just told her, go to urgent care. They can give you some IV insulin. And then, then you can go from there. Follow up with your doctor or whatever. Yeah. It's crazy.
There were things that only took a few minutes, but they wouldn't get back to her for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And
it's
I was on the phone with people, with her roommate. I said, you have to go stand in the hallway and stare people in the face till they come help you.
Yeah.
And walk over to the doctor, ask this question. Don't wait for them to come back.
Yeah.
Arden said it wasn't just her. She said the second day she was there, a woman came in who had her gallbladder removed already. And she was having some sort of an attack where, I don't know, she ate something or whatever their body couldn't deal with. And she was just vomiting like uncontrollably. And my daughter said she vomited for 2.5 hours before somebody gave her a nausea medication.
Oh my God,
and she just sat in there yelling, I need help. I need this medication. And people would go, we'll be right back. We'll be right back. We'll be right back. But the funny thing is that I finally had to get on an airplane to go make sure she was okay. And I was in the ER. They weren't busy. It wasn't because they were overwhelmed. I would probably need a month and a lot of clipboards to sit there and really figure out what was going on. But bare bones, didn't quite know what they were talking about. No sense of urgency, no desire to really be helpful, just checking boxes and then kicking you. Like, that's what they wanted. Like, when I arrived, the floor manager was aggressively trying to kick Arden out of the hospital without answering any of her concerns. And I said, you haven't tested for this one thing yet. And he said, yes. By the way, Diane, we'd gone through a number of things. Arden had lower abdomen pain and it got worse, turned into stabbing. The stabbing went up into her sternum. We thought appendix, right? And, she had pretty much every appendix sign. Sent her to the hospital. They do a CAT scan. They tell her it's not your appendix. Now, listen to this, though. They tell her it's not her appendix, but you have cysts all over your ovary. We have to do an ultrasound right now to make sure they're not torsioned or twisted. And Arden's like, okay. I don't okay. Like, they had her on morphine at that point. She was just agreeing to whatever was going on. And they take her to the ultrasound. 2 hours later, someone walks in the room, the same person that told her, I saw your CAT scan and you have cysts all over your ovary. Came back in the room and she goes, there are no cysts on your ovary.
What?
But then did not explain that any farther. And she goes, wait, you came in here a few hours ago and said they were. And he goes, yeah, well, CAT scans aren't the right way to diagnose that. And she goes, what? And he goes, it's not that.
Yeah.
We're going to discharge you. She goes, I'm still in pain. And he said, well, yeah, you'll have to follow up with your OB. And then didn't tell her anything else. She's 19. She's with roommates from college. They're roommates, but they're not like lifelong friends or anything like that, you know, and they're good people and all, but they don't know the hell they're doing. And at one point, Arden said to me, I realized the two roommates I was with, they'd never even been in a hospital before. They weren't people who grew up with any kind of medical issues. They don't go to the doctor. They've never been to a hospital. They were scared out of their goddamn mind. And Arden's like, I'm high on morphine and like trying to make sense of what's going on. No one's checking on her. Like if I couldn't monitor her blood sugar, I was basically keeping her blood sugar stable from New Jersey. When I sent her to the hospital, I put her algorithm into a higher target so that she would ride a little higher in the hospital because I knew she was going to get there. They were going to hit her with pain meds and then nobody was going to help her. So like I kind of was ahead of the whole situation. But anyway, they send her home and, you know, not surprisingly, she woke up the next day not doing any better. And she struggled through the day. And around midnight, she calls me and says, I think this is getting worse. And she starts describing that the stabbing pain has gone from so she still has the cramping lower, stabbing sternum. Now the stabbing's in her left chest going through to her shoulder. And so I'm looking at everything and I'm like, this feels like gallbladder maybe? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I can see how it could get misconstrued early on, blah, blah, blah. Now the pain's moving up into her chest. It could be gallbladder. Okay. So I send her off to the hospital again in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. And I get right on an airplane. Like I'm on a plane by 7 a.m. And by the time I get there, I'm literally walking into this guy telling her, you got to leave. We've discharged you. Get out. And there's nothing wrong with you that we can find. She's sitting there and she's in all this pain. She's like, I started looking at my chart. They start talking about like it's psychological. Arden's like, I'm not crazy. Like I'm in pain, you know? And so I come in and I say, listen, hi, everybody, calm down. Like, hi, you know, like I'm here. Like I've now been awake. By the way, I've now been awake for 27 hours as I walk into that hospital because I wasn't planning on going somewhere in the middle of the night. And so I walk in, I orient myself with what's going on. I said, what tests have you done? And he goes through everything. And I said, you're sure it's not her gallbladder? I'm like, it's a pretty classic presentation at this point for gallbladder. And he said, yeah, it's not. I said, how do you know? And he goes, what? I said, what did you test? Because I asked Arden when I got there, have you been imaged? And she said, no. And he goes, we tested her bilirubin. And I was like, that's not a way to rule out gallstones. And by the way, Diane, he says to me, how do you know? And I said, well, I have a podcast and the internet. Why don't you know? So he's like, well, that's not a classic presentation. I said, no, it's a word for word presentation. It doesn't mean it's going to be that, but you need to at the minimum, give her an ultrasound, right? And now at this point, not only am I aware of this, I've educated myself on it on the airplane, but I'm in contact with an endocrinologist who listens to the podcast, who I'm bouncing things off of. Thank you very much if you're listening. And she's telling me the same thing, like backing up what I'm thinking. So I said, listen, she's here. Give her the ultrasound. If it's not that, then God bless, then we'll go. He says he tried to scare us into leaving. He said, she's already been discharged. If you want her to have an ultrasound, you have to walk back out of this ER, walk back in, check back in, go through the intake again, and then make your complaint. We'll see if we want to ultrasound it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I giggled and I said, well, that's not what's going to happen. I'd like to speak with the physician on call right now.
Good for you.
Yeah, he goes, he won't talk to you. And I said, yes, he will. Go tell the physician what I said. And he goes, this is not gallbladder. I said, may not be, but we've gone through everything else. This is the next reasonable step. You haven't tested her for it. We have. We tested her bilirubin. I said, that is not a test for that. You should know that. If you don't know that, you might want to go Google it or look it up or go back to school or whatever. And now he's staring through me. And I said, let's be real clear. if you put her back out on the street and she has a real medical emergency, I'm going to sue you. And he goes, hold on. And then he leaves. And he goes and talks to the doctor, and he's like glaring back into the room. So I stepped out into the hall and I glared at him while he was talking to the doctor. And so I just stared him in the face the entire time he was doing it. He comes over and says, this fascinated me. He goes, even though there's no presentation for gallbladder, the doctor's going to do the test for you to make you happy.
Oh
I said,
God.
and you know what I did? You'd be very proud of me. Very, very. I was proud of myself. I'm happy to share it here with everybody else. I de-escalated. I thanked him. I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, I really appreciate this. I'm just worried about her. And I just want her to have, like, you know, as much coverage as possible. She's here by herself. I can't stay here in the state for long. I need to make sure she's okay. Blah, blah. Like, I started he was full of shit, by the way.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And he came back in with his head. He didn't want to have his hat in his hand. So he came back and re-attacked me. You know, you're wrong, but we're still going to help you. Because, by the way, Diane, because hospitals are always run tests that they think aren't necessary. Right? Like that happens constantly. I just shut the whole thing down. I thanked him. I treated him like he was Jesus Christ himself. Thank you so much. You're wonderful, blah, blah, blah. He left the room. I looked at my daughter and went, what a asshole. And like, so
Exactly.
and she goes, you were so nice this time. I said, well, we got what we needed.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'm not looking to
as
fight.
long as you get what you need. Yep, exactly.
What
and
do
then
I
you
care?
Kill them with kindness. Yeah, because you kill.
I'm not here to like fight. I don't fighting with him. By the way, me being right or him being right's meaningless. I don't care.
Right.
So a few minutes later, finally the doctor comes in. My daughter goes, first time I'm seeing this guy. Been here 9 hours at this point. And he comes in, nice as could be. He goes, listen, I agree with what you're saying. Gallbladder's the last thing. We should definitely image it. Blah, blah. Did I get the nurse in trouble? Did I complain? I didn't do anything. I said, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. That's all. Thank you so much. They run out and give her the ultrasound. She comes back and that's it. No, it's okay. It's all good. You're going to have to go to an OB maybe. And like, so now we're down to like, I mean, we don't even know, honestly. Like we've eliminated so many things, like endometriosis, like is like one of the last things I can think of, you know, so she's going to go see an OB when she gets home. But that hospital stay was, I don't even know another way to put it. It was horrible.
Yeah.
And if she would have been by herself, they would have hit her with morphine, kicked her out. When she came back, they would have hit her with morphine and kicked her out again. They weren't really trying to help her. And then they would say things to her like, make a follow-up appointment with an OB. And she goes, I'm at college. I don't live here. And they'd say, well, you should call your doctor. So no direction, no like vibe even, you know what I mean? Not even like, hey, look, maybe it's this, or try to check in this direction. Just like you came here and asked us the question has been answered. And the answer is, we don't know, but you're not about to die. So get out. So,
it's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's America. Imagine somewhere else.
I will have to say, I'm glad I'm a nurse. I'm glad I'm a nurse, and I'm glad I'm a nurse at the hospital I went to, because I probably wouldn't have gotten, I mean, even though I've had problems with my care team listening to me, I probably still wouldn't have gotten the care that I did get.
No, of course not.
And I think it was only right. Yeah. And I say that all the time.
Yeah, Diane, this is the world now. You need to know what's wrong with you. And they're just the ones standing between you and the legal need for a prescription or a test or something like that. And I'm not saying it's everybody. I'm sure there's other places I could have sent my daughter in that situation, and they would have handled her very well. But it didn't happen this time. And we didn't start off poorly. Like, she just went in there like, you know, very kindly. I'm in pain. This is what's going on. Can you help me? You know, and, you know, they agreed. They were like, it sounds like your appendix. And then they came back and they're like, it's not your appendix. It's your ovary. It's not your ovary. It's, we don't know. Well, leave now. What? I'm still in pain. The stabbing pain's still here. Like, and so, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I don't know what people who aren't me, like, listen, Arden's really like she's a tough person, and but she's still 19, and they hit her twice with morphine in 48 hours. She'd been in pain for a couple of days. I got to that hospital. There were tears collected in her clavicle. She was crying so much. And and while she's standing there crying, and her roommate is distraught because this poor girl's never even seen a hospital before, this grown man, by the way, his name was Russell. And if anyone ever tells him about this, please let him know I said he's a prick. He's standing in front of him, like aggressively kicking them out of the hospital. Like he's being aggressive with these girls and like unnecessarily. And he's pushing them and using harsh language with them and being curt with them and not answering their questions and denying anything she said. So what Arden finally did was Arden said, even through the tears, she said, "I'm not leaving here. I demand you admit me."
Good for her.
And so like that froze him because he couldn't like, I think he couldn't street her once she asked. And so like it froze him. And then she said, "My dad's on his way. He just got off of a plane. I'm not moving until I speak to him. And if you don't like it, you have to admit me. I'm not leaving." And that's the only thing that stopped him.
Yeah.
So he was literally like aggressively badgering two 19-year-old crying girls, one of them who had been in pain for 3 days and was half loaded on morphine. And he was just trying to get them to walk out of the place. He didn't give a shit. So,
yeah. Unfortunately, my husband has met some of that too, because he's not, he's not medically savvy. He doesn't know how to advocate for himself very well. And he's met some doctors that were like that. And so now it's a struggle to get him to even just go get a routine checkup, because he doesn't think that they're going to listen to him or they're going to. It's just frustrating.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. And that's one thing about, I was always empathetic to the patients, but I'm even more so now that I've had to go through all of this.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's just crazy.
Everybody's not good at their job. I understand that. And some people just do things for a paycheck, or maybe they're just tired or whatever. I mean, any number of things could be happening, but there are very few jobs where that can't matter. Like you have to still follow through. And, it just, once I got there and, I got to the doctor, now the nurse guy, he's gone now. I don't see him again. And now it's a different nurse. And she's just like, pleasant, but literally no help. And in no hurry to speak of. Like, finally walked in and said, "We're discharging you now." And I got them to, what I ended up saying was, "Look, we have no answers whatsoever. None." And I said, "Is it possible she has an infection somewhere we can't see?" And they said, "Yes, that's possible." I said, "Okay, why don't you hit her with one course of an IV antibiotic? And then let her leave with something like a pill for a few days, like just in case. Not going to hurt her, and maybe we'll catch something by mistake." And the doctor goes, "Sure, no problem." Like, and just does it. And so I'm like, so you have opinions and then you don't have opinions. And then I say something and you say no, but then I say something, you go, "Sure, whatever." There's no consistency to it. First of all, if the IV antibiotics were a good idea, why didn't you think of it? And, and if they're a bad idea, why'd you do it? Like the whole thing is just confusing. And there's no answer except no one knows what they're doing. And if they do, they don't care enough to make sure they're doing it well. Because my point was with all that is she comes in at the checkout and she says, "Here, all of your prescriptions are waiting for you at this pharmacy. It's up the street." And I said, we don't have a car. And she goes, "What?" I said, "I just flew here from New Jersey. I do not have a car." She doesn't have a car. Her roommates brought her and left when I got here. We have to Uber back to her apartment. Can you please send these to a pharmacy near where she lives? And she looked at me like I asked her to erect the Chrysler building by hand. And I said, "I just need you to resend the scripts to a different pharmacy." And she stared at me like, Are you kidding me? You are asking me to do this? And then she says, "It's only up the street." And I said, "I don't have a car." And she goes, And I said, "Could I just have them in paper, please?" And she goes, "You just want them in paper?" And I said, "Yeah, can you just print them and hand me the prescriptions?" Because, by the way, they were scribing a bunch of stuff for her she didn't need. Maalox, like all kinds of 4 different, just throw stuff at the wall for stuff.
Get over the counter.
It was so clear it wasn't her goddamn stomach. And and they still tried to give her 4 other things. And I said, "Just print me the scripts. I'll go take care of it myself." And she goes, okay. 30 minutes later, I had to go hunt her down. I said, can I get those scripts so we can leave, please? Oh, yeah, hold on. And then she went and got them. They were kicking her out 5 seconds before. We can't give up this space. She's got to go, blah, blah, blah. Okay, print me the scripts, hand me the scripts. 30 minutes later, she hadn't printed the scripts. You know what she was doing? I was watching her. She was stuffing food in her face on the internet, telling a friend next to her about her weekend. That's what she was doing. I was listening and I was watching. So, and then she comes back. We're so busy. I'm sorry. We're so busy. I can see you playing Pong. I see you. I see you looking around to make sure that nobody sees you stuffing food in your mouth. Like I'm watching you. And it was mad. Like, it was absolutely maddening. And I have to be honest, Arden's going to be fine. Like, we're going to figure out what this is. She's going to be okay. But thank God she had this experience at a young enough age where she could like process it and understand what her needs are for herself in this, but an old enough age where she can go like, this isn't going to get better. Like, this is the norm if I ever end up in this situation again. Because like, I don't even think she would have believed me if I told her, you really have to take care of yourself. No one's going to help you. I mean, how in the hell are you supposed to believe that no one's going to help you in a hospital? It's fascinating, you know? Anyway.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy, ridiculous. Yeah, and I work there.
Yeah, you know. Like,
thank God I don't work in the emergency room.
I've heard you talk around it 3 times already, Diane. I hear you trying not to be unkind, but you're like, don't go to the emergency room if you don't have to. Like, what the hell?
Right.
Yeah.
I know. I tell people that all the time.
You're on the inside. I mean, and you're telling me don't do it. So I don't know. The whole thing's crazy. Anyway, I'm sorry. Is there anything we didn't talk about that we should have? Did we leave anything out, or anything you wanted to say that you didn't?
I will be happy to say that I work with 2 other type 1 diabetics on the night shift. Mm-hmm. One was diagnosed 1 month after I was, and the other was diagnosed at the age of 19. She's now 30, I think.
Okay.
So I when the 3 of us are on together, I call us Team Tandem. Because I eventually, once I finally did see an endocrinologist, he asked me about a pump. He was like, how come you're not on a pump? And I went through this spiel about how I was used to vials and syringes, and that's what my dad did. And he's like, well, you have good control. My A1Cs have been anywhere from 5.8 to 6.2.
Oh, good for you. That's fantastic.
Since I was diagnosed, yes. And I owe a lot of it to Juicebox Podcast.
Aw,
and being bold with insulin. So eventually I got on a pump. I've been on a pump almost 2 years now, and I absolutely love it. Mm-hmm. And I, at my last appointment, when the G7 was going to be coming out, he said, well, once it starts talking with the T-Slim, once they get that approved, then you will get the G7.
Very nice.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
One time here a couple weeks ago, we had 3 type 1 patients. We've had several that are using their pumps. So when you come to the hospital and you get admitted, we have a contract that the patient can sign so that they can use their own CGM and use their own insulin pump.
That's a great idea.
And yeah, it's awesome. In fact, we had this one gal who was admitted for gastroparesis and was on her insulin pump. And it was about 3 a.m. and the nurse came out to the desk and she said, my gal's blood sugar is like 300. And I was like, oh, she needs to be doing corrected boluses. Is she doing corrected boluses? A lot of my coworkers, I've educated them too. I've shown them my stuff, and they, I've educated a lot of people. And she's like, well, she says she's doing corrected boluses. So then I went in and talked to her, and she's like, yeah, I've been doing corrected boluses. And they had her on TPN because she wasn't able to eat. Mm-hmm. And because of her gastroparesis. And I told her, you should reach out to your endocrinology team, and they can come up with a profile for while you're on the TPN, they can change your profile.
Yeah.
And then the next day, So that was in the middle of the night, and her mom was staying with her because she was young. And the next day, her and her mom were out walking in the hall, and she stopped and was talking to me. And the mom was like, "Yeah, we're going to call the endo team tomorrow and talk to them about,
Making some changes, to combat.
Oh yeah, it's just so cool.
Yeah,
it's just awesome. It's just whenever I hear that somebody's using their pump, I always like to go in and say, "Hi, my name's Diane. I'm also a type 1." And
that's wonderful. Good for you.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's lovely just to open up and tell people and to share what you know with other people, so maybe they can help somebody else. It's really wonderful.
Totally.
Yeah. No, and needed.
I'm always looking on Amazon for ways to wear my pump without. So my clip, with the T-Slim broke right away.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I got this other, like a holster, and it was huge and bulky. And whenever I wanted to adjust to something, it was hard getting off my clothes. So I found some pocket underwear on Amazon that has 2 pockets in the front, and I wear my pump in my pocket, and I show all my coworkers. my pockets.
I'd just be amazed that you found underwear with pockets in it. That's amazing.
Yeah. In fact, there was one day my husband and I were out to eat, and I heard the pump go off, and I thought it was mine. I heard this pump, and I thought, oh, I'm going low? And I looked at my pump, and I was like, no, it's not me. It was one of the waiters. And I said, oh, my husband heard it too. And I said, oh, it's that gal. I see her tubing. And so when she walked by, my husband said, hey, your tubing's hanging out. And she's like, oh, yeah. And I said, yeah, I heard your alarm go off. I thought it was me. And she said, yeah, I'm going to go over and get some juice. Go get some juice. And then I was telling her about my pocket underwear. And another time I saw a gal, it was summertime, and this gal came in to the grocery store and was walking towards me, and I saw her pump hanging on her. She had on a little sundress with a little spaghetti strap. And I saw her pump, and I said, I like where you wear your pump. I said, I'm also a type 1. Let me show you something. And I showed her the top of my underwear with the pockets, and she goes, oh my God, where did you get those? And I was like, I got them from Amazon. And she goes, oh, I'm gonna have to check those out. I said, they're not that expensive. They're fairly inexpensive, and I absolutely love them.
Diane, you just named the episode Pocket Underwear. Congratulations.
Pocket underwear. That's right. Damn straight. I love my pocket underwear. It's amazing. And I'm always talking to my coworkers about, convenience and how to wear it. We're always talking about where we put our CGMs. I'll see sometimes I don't put mine on my arm very often because I don't really like people seeing it, because there's always people saying, oh, good for you. You're quitting smoking, or, you don't know.
Yeah, right.
So
that's it. It's my Shantix. Thank you.
Yeah. I saw a gal at the farmer's market, and she had her CGM on her arm. I said, really brave. I whispered to her, I said, you sure are brave wearing your CGM on your arm. And she was like, oh, yeah. She said that she had gestational diabetes, and they prescribed it to her while she was pregnant. And I thought, that is so amazing.
Yep.
That they're doing that. And my neighbor across the street, he's going through throat cancer, and they gave him a Libre. His wife messaged me one day. I was out and about, and she was like, hey, they just prescribed the Libre. Are there any suggestions? And I buy this spray-on adhesive, skin adhesive, it's like a skin prep.
Mm-hmm.
I said, oh, I've got some bottles of that. I'll bring one over. And I went over and we talked about it. And it's because they got him on, he's type 2 diabetic, and they got him on high doses of steroids while he's getting chemo and radiation. So yeah, it's just, I'm always educating people about it all the time. I think it's so important to talk about it. Sometimes I'm sad because I wish that I could share this with my dad.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I'm sorry.
Sucks. I missed him so much. I never realized. Sorry.
Don't be
I
sorry.
never realized how much he went through, counting carbs and trying to keep his blood sugars straight. I remember one time my mom had gone to the grocery store. I was about 4 years old, and my dad's blood sugar had been high, and he'd given himself several doses of insulin, and they finally caught up with him, and he went and laid down to take a nap, and my mom needed to talk to him, and she called the house, and this, of course, in the early 70s, late 60s, I guess. And she was like, I need to talk to Dad. Can you get him on the phone? And I went into the bedroom, and his eyes were wide open, but I could not wake him up. So I came back to the phone. And I said, oh, he's awake, but he won't get up. He won't wake up. His eyes are open. And so my mom knew something was wrong. And she came home, and he was extremely low blood sugar. And I remember my grandparents coming to show us their new car, and we wrapped my dad in a blanket, and they got him out to the car, and they took him to the hospital. It was just crazy. And,
And I didn't think you were going to make me cry at the end. Thanks.
Yeah, it just sucks. You wish that you could share the technology. And
yeah. No, I know. People who have that available to them now are fortunate in ways they don't even they may not even understand,
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember all of that stuff. I remember my dad was part of some kind of, he was some kind of guinea pig for a Good Samaritan Hospital in Portland. I remember going to Portland, my brother and I, and my mom, we stayed in like a boarding house while my dad was in the hospital, and they were doing some kind of, I don't know, it's not experiments, but some kind of trial thing. And my dad was involved in that. Yeah. My dad managed to keep all his fingers and toes. His kidneys were, he had chronic kidney disease from just all the years of high blood sugars, but he wasn't in dialysis, but it was getting to that point. And his heart had been quite affected. He'd had his first open heart when he was 35.
Oh, wow.
And then about 17 years later, he had a second open heart surgery. And he had significant arrhythmia. And that's ultimately what killed him, his heart. He had a regular heartbeat.
Right.
He didn't have AFib, but, he just had all the other stuff.
Well, I mean, it's that's a long time ago. And if you weren't lucky enough to, maybe even just, again, lucky enough to have a doctor who set your insulin about correctly for your activity and your food, you would just go along with high blood sugars and not know it, or be bouncing all over the place and not know it. And,
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And my grandma was always very protective of him. They had a very close relationship. It was sometimes difficult. It was difficult for my mom, my parents' marriage. They got divorced when I was 21. And my dad, he did manage himself, but he really relied a lot on my grandma, to help him too. And he tried to get my mom to, have her take over his care. And she was like, no, you're an adult. You need to take care of yourself, which is true.
Yeah.
But, he'd had all those years of being taken care of as a child. And, he was in track, and he was very active. And then, of course, as soon as he was diagnosed, then he wasn't allowed to do any of those kind of things anymore, which was really, really hard for him.
Yeah. No, it's that time of the time in the world where you can't be active anymore. It's long enough ago. I've talked to people who, this one woman was told by a doctor to drop out of college because men wouldn't want to marry her. So she might as well just go enjoy her life before it killed her. Like, that's a thing that God said. Yeah. It's a thing that God said to somebody. So
crazy. Yeah. I know there's so many. That's one the cool thing about the internet and multimedia. You can listen to podcasts. There's groups that you can join. One of my coworkers that's a type 1, she started a support group where they get together and they have cocktails and do fun stuff like that.
Yeah,
there's groups that you can join, in your community. And I belong to a couple of different groups on Facebook. I read a lot of people's stories, that have been diabetics for as long as my dad had been a diabetic, or, it was that long. And I can relate to their stories because I remember my dad boiling syringes on the stove and forgetting that they're on the stove and having the glass syringes explode all over the kitchen. And
I mean, the thing that grabbed me is sharpening his own needles on a whetstone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I remember my dad had a good size. It was like a 3 by 6 inch whetstone, and he would sit and sharpen his needles, and I would sit and watch him sharpen his needles. And I remember, when I first saw him doing it, I was like, what are you doing that for? And he goes, well, they get dull after I've used them a few times. They get dull, so I have to sharpen them so that I can give my shots without hurting me. Yeah. It's like,
yeah, now your stuff comes in the mail.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I just get on the phone, call them up, and
open your front door, and they're sitting there.
Yep. It's so cool.
Yeah, it is pretty great, actually.
It's crazy.
Diane, yeah. I'm a little out of time, so I have to say goodbye, but I really do appreciate this very much, and you coming on and sharing your story and letting me rant and rave about the hospital and everything else.
Of course.
Yeah, I appreciate your time.
Of course. That's the one beauty of your podcast that I love, is that you share as well. And I love it when you share. I'm always telling everybody about your podcast, and
thank you.
And when my psychologist, when I was seeing him and I was telling him about your podcast, he told me, you should start a podcast. You should start a podcast. And then he would think of names for me, like Night Shift RN Type 1. And
Diane, I'm against other people starting podcasts. I've already done it, and I have advertisers I need to satisfy, and I don't need you all out there splitting up the population.
No, of course. Yes. And in fact, my coworkers, her endocrinologist, I guess, has a local podcast. And she told me her doctor's name, and I went to her podcast, and guess who her guest was on that show? Was Jenny.
Oh, no kidding.
And I was like, oh my gosh. This is so crazy. I've listened to Jenny so many times on Juicebox, and here she is talking to my coworker's doctor. I was just like, it's just a small world, but not a small world.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, it's very funny. Well, Jenny's got a good microphone. I paid for it. That other podcast should send me some money. She probably sounded fantastic on it.
She did sound fantastic.
Diane, I paid for that. You understand?
Yeah. Well, good for you. See, you help people in so many ways. It's amazing.
Oh my gosh, you're very nice. Okay, well, thank you very much. Hold on 1 second for me. Arden started using a contour meter because of its accuracy, but she continues to use it because it's durable and trustworthy. If you have diabetes, you want the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. There's already so many decisions. Let me take this one off your plate. ContourNext.com/juicebox. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. I'm still rubbing my face on my new Cozy Earth stuff. The pullovers, I don't know what it's made out of. I mean, I guess I could figure it out, but who cares? I think it's whatever. What is a cloud like fat? No, it's beautiful. It's so soft. I'm going to say this, and I've already done what I need to do for Cozy Earth today. Like, I've made my money. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to keep talking. I don't know what it is about Cozy Earth stuff. Like, you put whatever words to it you want once you get it. When I wear it, I feel like I've upgraded myself. That's the best thing I could say. Like, when I put on like Cozy Earth joggers, like, yeah, they're sweatpants, right? But I put them on and I think, this is what Drake must be wearing right now. Like, when Drake puts on some sweats to go out and get like coffee or something, whatever he's wearing has got to feel like this. CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. And you could be a Canadian rapper too. Or a podcaster, I guess. Hey, if you have type 1 diabetes or you're the caregiver of someone who is type 1 and you're a U.S. resident, so sorry, Drake, you can't do this. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Complete the survey, support the podcast, support people with type 1 diabetes. You might really help yourself. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Go fill out that survey. Get it all done for me. Thank you. Lots of people with autoimmune seem to have trouble with their thyroid, and that's why I've made the Defining Thyroid series. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Click on Defining Thyroid, the menu, to find out more. Once there was a time when I just told people, if you want a low and stable A1C, just listen to the Juicebox podcast. But as the years went on and the podcast episodes grew, it became more and more difficult for people to listen to every one. So I made the Diabetes Pro Tip series. This series is with me and Jenny Smith. Jenny is a certified diabetes care and education specialist. She's also a registered and licensed dietitian and a type 1 herself for over 30 years. And I, of course, am the father of a child who was diagnosed at age 2 in 2006. The Pro Tip series begins at episode 210 with an episode called Newly Diagnosed or Starting Over. And from there, all about MDI, pre-bolusing, insulin pumping, bumping and nudging, variables, exercise, illness, injuries, surgeries, glucagon, long-term health, bumping and nudging, how to explain type 1 to your family, postpartum, honeymoon, transitioning, all about insulin, temp basals. These are all different episodes. Setting your basal insulin, fat and protein, pregnancy, the glycemic index and load, and so much more, like female hormones and weight loss. Head now to juiceboxpodcast.com. Go up in the menu at the top and click on Diabetes Pro Tip. Or if you're in the private Facebook group, there's a list of these episodes right in the featured tab. Find out how I help keep my daughter's A1C between 5.2 and 6.2 for the last 10 years without diet restrictions. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Start listening today. It's absolutely free. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.